I don't follow the Lush and horror. The truth is, everyone is literally doing the best they can.
Of course, you know.
I mean, except for Matt Rife.
This podcast just got Rife. Is there a certain amount, base level of respect you have as a comedian, and for anyone who's willing to get up there on the mic and face the crowd?
No.
Can we warm it up a little?
Yeah.
Get your own theme music, Raanan. How many podcasts do that? Ladies and gentlemen, very special guest in the house. Big fan, Raanana Hershberg. Hershberg. Welcome to the show. Hershberg. We're gonna geek out on comedy. We're gonna talk about process, joke writing, the grind,
Filmmaking.
analyze some movies.
It'd be so funny if you just did this for an hour. And
This is the whole. Oh yeah, you just gotta sit and watch it.
Hershberg. All right, that's it.
Raanana Hershberg. All right. Hershberg. This is completely experimental. We've never done this before. We're trying to spice things up.
Leave it on in the background. It's good.
So anyway, where are you from? Hershberg. Hershberg.
Can you do the
Hershberg. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Raanana Hershberg to Ami's house.
That was like when a girl holds your hand and there's that tension of like, when is this going to end?
Okay, so the feedback is it went a little long.
No, I liked it. It was just that. It's not nothing against it. It's just that.
You
tension,
got the
like,
semi, and then it just went
keeps
down.
going longer and longer.
Yeah. So it was exciting, and then you're like, okay, now it's starting to get clammy.
Yeah.
It's starting to get sweaty.
A little.
Is that still her hand, or am I holding my friend's hand? Back in the day, funniest thing ever, my friend was like cuddling when we were all like raging as teenagers. And you know how like everybody kind of is sometimes going for the same girl?
Yeah.
Like if there's like a couple of guys and everyone's just kind of like making contact in the subtlest like.
Sure enough.
So he was like rubbing her back, and you can like spot it. It was like the funniest thing. So
Three guys rubbing.
So
the same
I started
bits.
just as a joke, like just tickling his hand so that he thought it was hers, and he thought he was like making progress.
That's really funny.
We ended up hooking up and sleeping together that night. He had no idea, but anyway.
That's really funny. You hyped it up a little by saying the funniest thing ever.
Damn it.
I was like, that's good.
You're
I don't know if it's the funniest thing ever.
Right. Okay, good.
I was like, the minute you said that, I was like, man, this better be good.
I thought I ended by me actually. We really slept together, me and my friend, a dude, and I'm not even gay.
And it was hilarious.
And it was hilarious.
Could
And it
not
was
stop cracking
totally
up.
not gay.
Yeah.
But, well, we have a legit comic, so we're going to be ribbing and roasting here. Raanana Hershberg, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Really
It's
good to
nice.
have you.
Flanked by Jews.
You're a stand-up comic.
Yeah.
And I just discovered co-host of the with Joe List on.
It was interesting. You're like, I'm a huge fan. Not big enough to know who you are.
You've been listening. I've been sending him clips all week, and he's like, "Cool, I'm excited." And he's just discovering that he's.
So you have a podcast with Joe List.
Yeah,
We talk
yeah,
about
yeah.
movies. It's called Joe and Raanan Talk Movies.
Yeah, it's a bad title. I shouldn't put my name in any title.
You don't have podcasts though where you don't think twice about who the hosts are. You just kind of listen.
I guess I kind of know who I'm. I mean, I don't care. I'm not like outraged, but it's an interesting thing to listen to something and be like, I don't know who this person is.
I just discovered the Joe Rogan podcast is the guy from Fear Factor. I had no idea. I listen to it like 3 hours a day. It's crazy. No, but I do love it. I think you guys do awesome.
Thanks,
I
man.
learned a lot
Appreciate
about
it.
filmmaking.
How many
Thanks.
people in the industry have you come across and said huge fan, and you've seen one thing or nothing? Just as a way to kind of talk.
Me, I've said huge fan.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone who is bigger than me says something nice to me, I go, I'm a huge fan.
I happen to love your Joe Rogan bit. That was maybe one of the first. I don't know if it was the first, but I came across where you said like,
Oh yeah.
Joe Rogan, you get the whole audience to clap for you to say like, I think he's a
Right.
danger to society. I really do. Everyone's like, yeah, good on you calling him out. The only way I would ever go on his podcast is if he asked me.
Right. This is how much of a hypocrite I am. I
Yeah.
posted that clip.
Yeah.
But then also was like really worried he'd see it, but also wanted it to get views, but not him.
Well, the danger is he only sees the first half.
I know,
And
right?
then-
No.
Wait, what's the joke? What's the joke? If
It's just like, I think in the Dangerous Society, the only way I'd ever remotely consider being on his podcast is if he asked me. It's like,
if him or anyone from his staff asked me, I would say. What I love about that joke is like, people can say all sorts of funny things on stage, but it just calls out exactly what everyone's really thinking when they criticize. Easy to just shit on like one of the most impactful cultural.
Well, that's what.
people.
Yeah, that's what I thought. If he ever saw it, I don't know him, but if he ever saw, I mean, he does follow me, so I'm like, I hope he doesn't see. Or if I would, but I feel like if he saw it, he'd realize I'm kind of making fun of other people. But it is
yes. He's of all things he is. I would imagine Joe is not sensitive.
But I don't know. But I do call him transphobic. But I only do that to like
to bait the audience.
And also, I'm like talking about something transgender before that, so it's like a segue. But like, I don't really care. But I don't know. Maybe he'll.
Dude,
whatever.
I wouldn't think twice about it. It's hilarious. I think that wins the game. Funny wins.
But it's funny to just be like post something and hope that one person doesn't see it, but everyone else does. Just gotta hit that mark, I do have those moments too when I'm calling someone out in a video in any particular way. You kind of are like, okay, and then if they like actually see it in like your story or something, you're like. Yeah, it's a little worrisome. Yeah.
Our last episode, we were talking all about Shane Gillis on SNL, and like we got pretty like we really criticized it, the good things and the bad things. But I think we were both like.
But I called myself out at the end. I'm like, I at the same time hear myself talking a lot, and we can get into it. I'd love to hear your take on the Shane Gillis SNL thing. I called myself like a douchebag. It's like, who am I to just like this is I wanted to like first. Share my praises, not to just like be a brown nose, but it's just an amazing thing. And like you see people who have takes, who not to say you have to be in a position to have an opinion or have authority on something, but it's always funny to me when someone's just like, I'm just very much an anti-hater in any sort of way, especially for people who are doing it.
I do think the level of shit talking people have in public. Is directly proportionate to how little people they know in the industry. Right. So if someone talks shit about everyone, you're like, well, you just don't.
So what do you think about the Cat Williams thing? We'll get right to it.
Well, you just don't know those people. Like, and I'm guilty of it too. But like, the more people you know, the less you can talk shit publicly.
Oh yes, because it implicates you in that you will actually
you might
come across them.
Yeah, you might run into them. You know?
That's one of my criticisms for most podcasts about Hollywood, where they're in the industry and they need their relationship, so they can't really be that judgmental about a lot of TV shows or movies.
No, you can't. Yeah, that's so. Yeah, I mean, like so we do the podcast on movies.
Yeah,
I was in Europe. And I was opening for Louis, and Quentin Tarantino came to the show, and he came afterwards and started talking to me, and he was like, I guess Louis had talked to me. He goes, "So I hear you're have a movie podcast. Do you ever talk about me?" And like I remember we had like a whole long episode where I think he's kind of overrated.
And you're the Key and Peele sweat that's just shooting from your head.
Yeah, and I was like, man, I hope he never watches it.
You're like, oh, sorry, who are you?
I was like, sorry, I didn't know I'd ever meet you. But it's funny. It's like I'm just a shit talker in the basement, like, oh, he's overrated. But then you see him, and I'm like, he's the most.
But there's a difference between being artistically critical versus being like a hater. Yeah, and like you see so many people when I switched to comedy from music, like in adding that to the lane of stuff I was involved in, like one thing I noticed. And maybe it's because I didn't see it as much because when I first got into music, I was just like a teenager.
Yeah.
But the vibe of like insecurity and everybody judging each other and like being so intimidated or upset when you hear a good set from someone else. Coming from the music world, if somebody does something cool on stage, you're like, dude, you're excited by that. You're geeking out. Show me what pedals you use, what effects. That's such a cool like technique. Can you teach me that? And I found that comics were much more territorial, much more insecure. Oh, I don't want to follow that guy. It felt like the competition for being the funny guy in the room.
It's insecure narcissist.
And so I had such an aversion to that attitude because music was much more supportive. And I could have a bias because I'm coming from having a lot of years in music versus not. But in comedy, it just seemed really over.
And people in general. I made a short film and I posted it online. And yeah, I'm not like in it, but like the comments are just so much nicer than any stand-up video. It was like sad. I was like, no one's called me fat in any of these comments. It's like,
what do you think that's from? You think of the barrier to entry? Everyone feels like they can be funny, so they feel like they can say something.
They feel like they can be funny. I think it's you, so it's the point of view you have, so they can be offended. And I think a lot of people, when they're offended by something you say, they just make fun of you. Like they don't even. They might not even. Say
they don't separate the art from the artist.
Yeah, they might not even be like, "I'm offended by your take on Trump." They're just like, "You should do more push-ups." You know what I mean? Like,
but I also mean like other comics, like the collegial element.
Yeah,
I start to feel it more now, like working my way into the scene and working my way up a little more. But in the beginning, it's just vicious the way a lot of comics are like. like hate on each other or are just very judgmental of each other's.
Well, yeah, and that's thing,
which is different than being constructively like, oh, I think this joke could. So there's support in like helping each other's material and punching up. But I found that like there's this threatening territorial.
Well, and the people who talk crap about Shane after this, to me, it's just like, I mean, I love Shane. I think he's really funny. I think he did a great job, and I think like the unbelievable amount of pressure of doing this thing that literally everyone is going to watch, like everyone. And it's a lot. And it's like, dad. I mean, like late night is kind of whatever. I've done late night, but not like. Not everyone's watching it. Like this is like everyone's.
Also, late night has an audience that's more of a studio audience. I feel like, and SNL is like industry. If you kill, they're like that was pretty funny.
Yeah, and like maybe some of them have animosity towards him. It took a lot of balls for him to go on there.
Yeah,
and I just think like and I think he did great. You know what I mean? And I think he like it when people take him down. I mean, I don't know when people take him down. Well, first of all, say whatever you want behind someone's back. I don't care. I don't think that matters. Right. I don't follow the Lush and Horror. Lush and Horror, Lamed Hay, tell me it anyway. Do you ever hear that phrase?
Go to hell the easy way.
I never heard that.
But
Lush and Horror is one of the best things ever. But talking smack behind people's back.
But like, but like, if you publicly like criticize someone, I'm like, well, anyone who does that is just not. I mean, first of all, it's like a real person. I don't know.
Yeah. But also, okay, aside from like just hating on, I'm not talking about even the controversy. Of people who like weren't fans of him because of that, but from a constructive comedy standpoint, do you feel like he crushed and slayed in the way people wanted him to, who are fans of him? I feel like there's a little bit of that graciousness given, fair enough.
Yeah.
But in the way that like when Bill Burr went on and did his thing in a way that only he could do, that like turned SNL like this,
right?
In a very like turning the woke elements against each other in a set. Bill Burr has this magical way of seemingly bombing for the crowd that's there, but killing for all of us watching.
Right.
And I don't think Shane did that. That's okay, but I feel like some people think they want him to be. They're giving him those like great. They're giving what's the word? His grapes. What's the word I'm thinking of? They want to give him his
nut.
When someone wants to give you your praises, when someone wants to give you your
accolades.
I know what you mean. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're looking for.
There's a word. Yeah. Anyway, like a lot of the support system around Shane, which I'm very impressed by how much adoration he has from all the fellow comedians. That's really cool to me. In a world where everybody hates on each other, everyone has only amazing things to say about him in that world, and everyone was very supportive post SNL. But I when I watched it, I was like, that was solid, that was good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think he did it his way. Mm-hmm. I think he was himself completely.
Yeah,
and I think that's really impressive. I also think it's kind of like, people are like, well, he was nervous. He admitted jokes don't work, and you know what I mean. On one hand, I don't know. Maybe I personally wouldn't have done that, but for him. He's being himself completely, and sometimes it's hard to explain, but sometimes there's confidence in being nervous, of opening up about your nervousness. It actually takes. I think Joe List is really good at that. I think there takes a certain confidence and familiarity to actually be openly nervous.
Right.
You know what I mean? To not hide it.
I think he also had
not that he's openly nervous, but to be open about like. Well, he says it. He says I'm nervous. Like,
this is what I'm experiencing right now.
Like, I think there's a lot of confidence, and I admire it. And honestly, like. Yeah, people have a rule like don't mention that you're not like a joke's not hitting, but like honestly, I watched it and I laughed a lot. I think it was good. I think
he also had to disentangle some of the pressure also from the audience and the cast and everything. Be like, I'm not perfect.
He's like, I know my don't work on TV.
Yeah, like it's like I'm a human being. I get nervous. I'm not always so funny.
You know what it is? I think for me, what I was looking for. A little bit, and I think a lot of people subconsciously are looking for like not comparing it to everybody who's ever done the monologue, but there are certain comedians, Norm Macdonald having that like Return of the King moment, or Louis C.K. going up and actually doing one of the most controversial kind of jokes of the pedophile joke, and making it work, and like he's like we got through it, and he's admitting that vulnerability, but in a funny way, like a masterful way.
I'm pretty sure.
And then Bill Burr going up there and saying, "That's kind of a long month, June." For gays, for a group who's never been enslaved, and like everyone has to go,
but like,
so that's not Shane's like style.
Well, it's also like they're coming at it from different places. Like Louis and Bill Burr were like really like household names at the point they did it, and so it wasn't as much an away game for them. You know what I mean? Like once you're at a level of fame, you're like every place is like your home. You know what I mean? Yeah. But for him, he's younger. He got big by getting. He got big after getting fired from that show.
Yeah.
So there's so much. It's a whole different.
I felt like he played nice in a gracious way. Like he didn't say what he could. Like he didn't give it to them.
I think the truth is, and I'm someone who does like make fun of comics just for different comics just for fun, just because I like to. But the truth is, everyone is literally doing the best they can.
Of course,
you know what I mean?
I agree with that.
Even if it's a comic you hate, they're literally doing the best they can. And there are comics who I hate, but I also recognize like, and Shane I think is one of the best. But there are comics who I hate where I recognize that like. I might hate them for certain things they do.
Like personally or their comedy?
Their comedy. Right. Certain things they do on stage. Maybe they do it in a way that I think is like over the top or something. But I also recognize if they didn't do it that way, they'd probably be less unique. So sometimes you hate someone for kind of leaning into what they're doing, but that leaning in is what makes them unique.
Like
I just hate them.
Cook.
Yeah. They've like fulfilled they fulfill their voice. It annoys the hell out of me.
Right.
But the version that wouldn't annoy me is a version that probably wouldn't rise to the top.
I kind of respect like at the end of the day, if someone's finding an audience for what they're doing, who am I?
Yeah,
I can say, I mean,
except for Matt Rife, who I just hate for. I just think a comic should have an obligation to hate him.
Really?
Yeah. I've heard he's great.
I love Matt Rife. Yeah. I don't know him, but when I watched his Ascent, I thought his crowd work was very solid off the cuff. But tell me.
I hate him, and people are like, well, he sells out theaters. He must be doing something right. And I'm like, who also sold out theaters is Hitler. Was he doing something right?
Wait, did you hate him?
And at least Hitler goes right into material.
You don't think Matt Rife's doing the best
work?
You don't think Matt Rife's doing the best he can?
Do you hate him just because he's so handsome? Or?
No, I'm not into that CGI'd. I hate the
CGI.
Well, first of all, I don't like when white comics sound black. It's like, who do you think you are, Indian?
There's
you know
so many who do that. What about when Indians sound black? Gosh, yeah.
But I don't like that.
Indians can do it.
And I don't like. He represents this thing where he's like, everyone's not really into. It has nothing to do with art. It only has to do with his journey of being successful. So everything he posts is about look how successful I've become. He's like. Famous for famous sake.
But do you think he does that, or that's just been done to him?
He promotes. He creates the tone. Yeah, of course. He is a promoter. He creates the tone. You know what I mean?
He's a piece of content.
Yeah, and I think I hate him. You know what I mean? If I run into him, it'll be awkward, but I don't care. I think he sucks.
Have you seen him live and had interactions?
No, but I know nothing about him but his stand-up, but it's awful. Like it hurts me to my soul.
Does this contradict everything you said before getting up to Matt Rife? Is he the exception?
I guess so.
I feel like you guys are going to date at some point.
Because
or it's just the confidence I have that he will never watch this podcast.
Right. Oh,
you can tell someone. You can tell how.
Well, actually, Matt is here. Let's bring him out.
I used to do a podcast. You can always tell how little the person had faith that people listen to the podcast by how much shit they talk about everyone.
Right. Everyone's doing the best they can. Everyone, and I really respect everyone's hustle, and you hate Matt Rife.
Well, Hitler was also doing the best he can. I just like comparing him to Hitler.
I don't know. For me, the stuff I always saw of him, I never quite understood the disproportionate hate towards Matt Rife.
He's one of these Pete Davidson characters to me. I don't know a single Matt Rife joke or Pete Davidson joke, but they're very present in my lives as comedians.
Pete Davidson, I feel that way about because I'm like, where are the jokes? Like, what's happening here? It's just a vibe.
No one can mention a Pete Davidson skit or joke or sketch.
When you just do crowd work online, you become famous without anyone knowing a joke, and it's like I find that.
But people do crowd work for. I mean, Norman does crowd work. I mean, people do crowd work for specific reasons. Because
I don't begrudge people.
Give away the bits.
I don't begrudge people doing crowd work.
Right.
But when it's like all you do, and that's what all you showcase, it first of all makes audiences.
Hasn't he spoken about that though? Like, I hate that people think they could just come and shout it at my shows. I have material.
He caused that. that's what.
Are you always responsible for how you get successful? Given the internet, though.
I think I don't know if it's fault, but I hate him, and I hate what he did. I don't know. It's not his. I mean, everyone. Well, I will say this: his promotion is this kind of narcissistic thing I really hate.
Right.
Where he'll like just post a shot of him like he's like dream bigger if your dreams can come true, and then it'll be a picture of him like at an open mic, and the next picture is him at an arena, and I'm like, I just think that's arrogant. I think we've stopped.
Are there people who do it well that you like, that you appreciate the humility?
Wait, I want to hear the rest of that point first.
I just think we've stopped being aware of when people are just bragging. It used to be like you used to have a little bit of like have a little bit of humility, but when you're just like, look how far I've come, anything is possible. When you're so successful, you're using your success as a symbol of what other people can dream to do. It is such a form of unempathetic narcissism where you've cast your own success bragging, by the way, and formulated it into this BS. Any dream can come true kind of thing. And it's like, you're just bragging.
There's Matt calling.
You're just bragging. I just hate that thing. I hate when people brag.
This is speaking your language, less mine. Yeah. But this podcast just got Rife, so thank you for that.
Because there's also that thing of like when Matt Rife was doing badly, he wasn't like, oh man, I must not be dreaming big enough. I must not be working hard enough. It's like I'm not. I haven't gotten lucky yet. Something hasn't broken my way. And then when he is successful, he's not like, yeah, things broke my way. I got a little bit lucky.
People who don't,
I'm happy to be here.
People who ignore luck at all are just. I just think that's a crappy way to do it. I saw a meme by Kobe Bryant, and I don't mean to speak ill of the dead. Though he did agree to go on that helicopter when it was like. Really
Have you ever seen him do crowd work? It was terrible.
But it was some quote he said where he
that was dark. Man.
It was some quote he said where he was like,
"Hey, you got in."
There was some quote he said where he's like, "I hate people who are lazy and make excuses.
Yeah.
I've gotten everything through hard work. Luck wasn't involved." And I'm like, "Well, you were lucky enough to not be short. If you were short, you wouldn't be anything."
And your dad was an NBA player who raised you in Italy.
Luck plays. You got to work hard, but even that is luck. The fact that you have the ability to work hard, luck plays such a huge part in everything. And when you ignore that, you're condemning other people. You're like you're bragging about something that shouldn't be fully in your credit. I just hate that.
I'm with you, man. Yeah, what respond?
I will say that many more. The problem isn't too many people bragging; it's too many people complaining. The culture is just filled with people entitled to success more than people who've achieved it and are sharing their success.
I guess I hate both. I hate everyone.
For me, what takes up more of my like when I was kicking myself for something not happening, like back to your initial point of everyone's really doing everything they can do. Whenever something's not happening, like at the end of the day, the best advice I ever got was it's all me in the sense that it's all on me.
Yeah.
Even if I miss an opportunity or if somebody cancels the show or I get screwed, then I have to adapt to that. And there's so many people.
What's on you is your reaction to how you respond.
And the amount of people I come across who, what I used to call, and especially living in LA, I called them clabs.
Yeah.
And it sounds douchey to make up a name, but I just, between me and him, used to talk about it. Classic LA bullshitters. The people you meet, and the first thing, 2 seconds out of the first sentences out of their mouth are what they're up to.
Right.
Like, yeah, I'm working on this thing. I'm like, okay. And I had to use a filter to find out who's like up to productive things that might be good to collaborate with. And like make stuff with, and who's just like. So the people who are busy are just like, they're humble enough to know like everything almost happens.
Yeah.
And so many things come close. So not to just like talk and talk and talk. And the giveaway for people who really weren't up to much are the people who over talk about all these big projects they're in. And and the people who would complain to me, sometimes people would like come to me for advice about how to do a certain thing or get a song in this or that. It was just like, there's a lot of entitlement without them even realizing it, and expectation and complaining. I should have gotten this. It's like, there's no should have.
I guess I'm open-minded to hate both those things. I'm expansive.
So then when it does happen, it's just like the short answer and the hard answer when people say, it's like, look, you just have to put in the reps. Yes, luck's a part of that, but it happens from being there.
Of course, you have to be prepared.
Yeah.
But the people who make it successful and then act like it was all them, as if luck wasn't involved at all, I just think that's a really unempathetic way of looking at the world. And by the way, I don't hate Matt Rife out of bitterness. I don't even know him. He might be a nice guy.
Yeah.
I hate him from a spiritual reason. He hurts my soul when I watch it. He makes me not like comedy. Like
you are hating the theater representation of him though, because you don't know him personally. This is
not him. I don't.
You're hating what he's putting out.
What he's putting out,
which is different,
hurts. Yeah, of course. He might be a nice guy.
Yeah.
What he's putting out hurts my soul.
If he got reincarnated into a baby, you would then hate that baby.
No, I guess
it has nothing to do with him. It's what he's about.
It's the opposite. If he was a baby, at least he didn't. If he was a baby, he videos of crowd work.
So when Mark Norman put out this video that I thought was actually moving, he was like, I rarely post like this, but he had sold out the Beacon, and he showed a little highlight reel. He's like, hey, I'm Kevin Hart. I'm gay. Thank you so much, everybody. And everyone's cheering, and he's clearly put in the long game.
I don't mind that. Of course not. Mark's a friend. I don't mind that. I mind hiding it behind that dream motivational speak that Matt Rife did, where he's like, dream bigger and anything can happen. It's like, no. You're just talking about you, and don't hide that. Don't hide what you're saying. Just say, hey, I'm really grateful. I've gone a long way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But don't hide it behind this life coachy, motivational speaking that just makes people feel bad, honestly, because they're like, well, if that's true, why aren't I doing well? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
It's not only hard work. Hard work plays a part,
Right.
but a lot of people get successful without working hard, and a lot of people work really hard and don't get successful.
Do you think they can sustain success without having a good work ethic?
Yeah.
If somebody like blows up quick and then they can sustain it?
Well, I mean, so many people are famous that don't work hard.
Really?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, it goes both ways. I mean,
Name drop.
Yeah. who like A++ lists here? Like someone we're never gonna meet. Who do you have in mind when you say that?
Because I've always discovered the ones who have real sustained success. I'm like,
are we just talking about stand-up? I guess I was talking about anything.
I guess we're talking about stand-up. Or in the success movie you've come across that you're like, he doesn't work hard.
Anyone who's successful in stand-up works hard at something.
Yeah.
But they might not work hard at material. You know, I know hard work also means different things. A lot of now people say work hard just purely promotional, and you're like, well, what about working hard on your art? That's not even. That's the thing I resent about him and a lot of comics now. Yeah. It's moved so far away from what joke you can do. If you're a comedian, and I don't know one of your jokes and can't remember one of your jokes, to me you failed. If you're famous, I can't remember one of your jokes and think about it. You failed on something.
But you're good at something, probably podcasting.
Well, of course.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to see more with Raanan Hershberg, please go over to our Patreon for some additional bonus content. And we're back!
Hershberg.
Okay. But on the whole thing of like success bias, the people who are saying those things dream big as just some general platitude have made it. You know, so there's
of course,
and there's plenty of people who are doing exactly what they're doing.
Well, it's like there's a story about like a painting. I forgot what it's from. A painting of sailors. I read it maybe in Montaigne, the French essayist, who was a family of convertos or whatever they're called, Spanish. But he Jewish or whatever the conversos. I forget what they're called in Spain, but I forget what they're called. The Jews who converted, forced into conversion, and then I forget what they're called. But anyway, there was a painting. I think it was him, but there was a painting of sailors who were drowning and they prayed to survive, and they survived. Oh yeah. And people look at it as evidence, but like, what about we just don't see the sailors who prayed to God and died? We don't see them, so it's like it is always it's like when people with the vaccine were like, I don't know, man, this guy took a vaccine and he died a week later. Well, millions of people are getting the vaccine, and people do die. That is something that happens, so that's gonna happen.
We found a way into every controversial subject.
I just think
same with COVID though, right?
Wait, do you want to be a Rogan or not?
I just think personally, like,
because you could also say people died from COVID, but millions of people didn't.
That's true, yeah.
But I know what you're saying. There's a bias to something that did happen, and you can the correlation to
something that didn't happen. Yeah.
Yeah,
to the universes that didn't exist. Yeah. I mean, like, it's just like I just don't think people understand statistics very well. Right. But like, yeah, I just think it's really like self-centered and solipsistic to like look at yourself and be like, dream big, man. And you know what I mean? Just say you're grateful.
I think temperamentally for me, I always I understand that's like a yucky kind of thing, like, ugh. But my eye roll is bigger for the people who are always making excuses for their lack of success, not their success.
That's annoying too. Yeah.
There's two sides of the same coin. To me, there's many more people out there who say, if only I'd gotten that thing, but they reject me and I could have, or they're just like not being productive and putting in the work. Like you're saying, like some people maybe don't give enough attention to the craft of stand-up and they're getting disproportionate attention, and you'd feel like it's not really warranted given how little effort they put into it. Yeah. But they're clearly putting in attention somewhere, because we're in the attention economy. And guys, I've seen stand-ups get up there and they have massive podcast audiences or online audiences, but I don't know how long you can sustain a live career, because the audience tells you very quickly in a room when it's not working. Even though they get by on the laurels of like, oh, I'm here to see this guy because I like his vibe. Right. And I don't have to name names per se, but I've seen people, and it's like big podcast audience or big TikTok following, and 10 minutes in.
Yeah, no jokes.
You're like, oh, it's a vibe.
I think every comedian has a choice at some point. Not everyone, but at some point, every comedian, especially when they get a little success, have a choice. Mm-hmm. Do I want to be an artist or do I want to be a personality? Yeah. And a personality is the kind of person who makes it all about them and their journey and has nothing to do with their jokes or their material, And everyone's a little both. But some people at a certain point choose, I'm going to be a personality, not an artist. You know what I mean?
Can you tell
and then they're doing a game show.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about the art of stand-up and what you think that means?
The art of stand-up?
To be an artist as a stand-up?
I mean, stand-up is a weird thing where it's like half an art and half a sport. It's a sport in the sense that there is a scorecard that's visible, like you are getting laughs. You have to like...
It's combat.
It's combat, and you have to, for the most part, you have to get laughs to be a good comic. The art part is so many comics can crush, and on a subjective level, I think they suck, and I think they're hacky, and I think they're like... shooting at the lowest common denominator, and the material's not unique. That's the art part, you know. So the score part is you got to do well, for the most part. That's important. You can't be like, there's no comedian who is so ahead of his time that he bombed all the time, and then we look back and we're like, no, he's a genius because it's all in the moment.
It's a very audience-dependent art form.
Yes, and it's
that's a part of the success of it.
Yes.
The very unique thing about stand-up is like you can sit in your room and compose beautiful music, and no one has to hear it.
Of course,
but it's there and it's quality.
Yeah, the hours for. The Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours.
Yeah,
those only happen on stage as a stand-up.
That's why the hardest part.
That's why it takes so long to get good.
Because you have to rehearse in front of people,
and you're only rehearsing at the most, like you can't do 5 hours. Or
but you think people up there can kill and crush consistently in front of any audience without material?
No, I'm saying they can have really bad material. That's the art part.
Well, that's what I mean. Bad material or no material, like material that isn't good.
Well, there is a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. I've seen more likely than not. Someone says, "Oh, the crowd was shit, didn't work, this and that, or not great." I'm like, it's the jokes, man. It's the jokes. The writing is niche. It needs work.
Well, that's what a hack is. Someone who can get huge laughs on not original jokes. That's the art part. The art part is.
We say not original, just like hacky, not like stolen.
Yeah, people have done it. It's done. You're doing well based on an audience who just doesn't. I mean, the audience can be malleable in any way. It's much harder to get a big laugh on something unique, and that's the challenge. If you're just doing like easy crowd work or the kind of jokes that everyone's been doing, and you're getting laughs, that's the art part. I point and say, "Yeah, you're crushing, but you're a hack." And there is a difference. I mean, obviously there has to be a difference because people are judged on their material. They're not simply judged on whether they get laughs. You know what I mean? That's a part of it. That's the sport part,
right?
But the art part is, are you unique? Is this something I haven't heard? Is this a unique point of view? And crowd work, by the way, for the most part, does not have a point of view. That's why it's easy to get a group, a big fan base, because when you have a point of view, you're limiting your fan base because you have like unique points that may offend people or people might not relate to. But having a unique point of view is the art.
Well, interfacing with an audience member and putting them into your world or giving like your analysis of their situation and making it funny in real time. Is that person infusing it with their point of view?
It can be, but
like Tim Dillon, I've seen him do it, and he's like, "Of course, he'd be like, what do you do? What do you do? Oh, he sells subprime mortgages, of course."
Tim Dillon's great at it, and you can make it your unique point of view. You definitely can. But a lot of the crowd, and I do have to remind myself, I don't hate crowd work,
right?
But there are a lot of crowd work I hate. I actually think it is really derivative and not good.
What about impressions? How do you feel about that?
I love impressions.
Okay, good. I know when I would do them at mics just to work stuff out. Boy, the looks that I get.
I don't think there's anything wrong with
like,
impressions.
Oh, this guy can do impressions. Whoop-de-doo.
I think it's more if, like, sometimes, like...
No, you need material with it. It's sauce.
I remember I always talk about this. It was, like, some guy, I forget what was on, like, Apollo or HBO, some comic years ago. Like, he was, like, a black comic. He was, like, an impressionist. But the way he forced celebrities into it was so funny, how bad it was. He would just be like...
And then I walked into a Burger King and Denzel showed up. I know which one you're talking about.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about.
I don't know the comic's name offhand. We don't have to say it.
He's like, I go to Taco Bell, and I got it. They fucked up my order. I asked to speak to the manager. The manager came back out. It was Morgan Freeman. It's like, why? Why is Morgan Freeman?
Give me a waffle, Mr. Sam's.
The manager.
Mr. Sam's.
And then Morgan Freeman talked to his boss, who was Denzel. It's like, why are these people
Why are they there?
Yeah, so it's like, I've always thought that was so funny.
Is there a certain amount, base level of respect you have as a comedian and for anyone who's willing to get up there on the mic and face the crowd?
No. I don't no, because the truth is, like, I don't think people... I don't think people do comedy out of some kind of like courage. I think they do comedy because they're afraid. Everyone's afraid to be on stage,
right?
But their bigger fear is being invisible. So it's just their fear of being invisible that outweighs essentially their narcissism outweighs their fear of being afraid to perform. So it
takes some balls to get up there and face the crowd.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean, you're over that. I get it, but I heard even Seinfeld, who everyone's intimidated, has said, like, look, if you're going up there and you're trying to make the room laugh, like, at a certain level,
Yeah, of course.
You're like, hey, most people are terrified of doing
this. I'm just
this.
unnecessary. But I will say it is like people are like, that takes a lot of courage. And I'm like, I don't know. I think it's more that my fear of being invisible is a greater fear than my fear of being in the spotlight.
You gotta loop that up.
What?
You gotta loop that up.
Okay.
If you want to.
That's a really good message.
I love
that's
that,
deep.
man. That's
well, I just think like, of course I was nervous. Of course I was nervous the first time I.
You don't have to.
Of course I was nervous. I was so nervous when I started comedy. I was so nervous when I started comedy. Yeah. But it's like other people who don't start comedy. I don't know if they're as much cowards as, because that's the thing. You're kind of like, I don't think the people who don't start comedy. I don't think they're cowards. I think their fear of being seen is greater than the fear of not being seen. You know what I mean? So for us, the nervousness, all of that is like what we go through to our ultimate goal, which is to be seen. You know.
Yes, but at the same time, I will say that like what you have to put yourself through to get good at comedy,
it's a lot. Yeah,
is not for the faint of heart.
No, of course
and
not.
It's brutal. I mean, I think Seth Rogen on Comedians in Cars was talking to Jerry. He was like, you know, there was a story of a guy who's a boxer who said, I really want to be a boxer until I met someone who really wanted to be a boxer.
Yeah.
So, like, to get on stage and do it, I wanted to be a stand-up comic until I realized, like, that there are people who really want to do this. And you subject yourself to so much pain.
But he's saying also, what do you mean by get good? You can get up and figure out how to get the easiest laugh and then just keep doing that for the rest of your career.
Getting the easiest laugh, I don't find is so easy.
I guess I also think, to me, it's not courage as much as temperament. Like, sometimes after shows, people are like, comedy, that can't be easy. It's got to be really hard. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I think your life is hard for me. Like, to me, working like I'm not begrudging people to do it, but for me personally, like the stability of working like a 9-to-5, what I don't like. I mean, I find that like hard
for different reasons.
So
completely.
It's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm more. For me, when people say comedy's got to be really hard, I don't know. I make a living at it, and I'm honestly extremely grateful that I'm doing something that I like.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people do stuff that they don't like, and I think that's hard. And a lot of people have no choice because they were, everyone can't do what they like because that's just not how it works. Right. So I'm very
fall in line.
I'm very grateful.
That's Tim Dillon. Some people just need to fall in line.
Yeah, I'm very grateful, but I'm not like, I don't like judge people who don't do it, and I'm more just grateful. And I don't brag like, look how far I've come. I'm more like, I mean, maybe I should, maybe I'd be happier, but I'm more just, I just feel kind of lucky.
I feel like if you tried that for 1 week on Instagram, you'd be selling out arenas.
I guess what I'm saying fundamentally is like, not that comedians deserve a disproportionate amount of praise for what they're doing and their courage or an applause, but I'm really speaking against the people who don't appreciate or are hating on those who are like, you know, at a base level, like willing to subject yourself to that kind of immediate, harsh, painful judgment and putting yourself through the process of. I mean, did you have a bombing? What about your bombing period where you had to
of course,
take me back to that a little bit? Like when did you first start getting up?
In my 20s, 23, 24.
Like post-college?
Yeah. I mean, I think I thought I was good right away. I was very arrogant, which I think actually probably does help on some level because you need a little delusion when you start. But
it was in the city. You were in New York City?
No, Louisville, Kentucky. I worked there for years and then was on the road. It's embarrassing. Comedy is very embarrassing. Right. Like, it's like pathetic. Like, and it's not always embarrassing. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes you're in a theater. But, like, a lot of times it's, like, a little embarrassing. You perform somewhere, you're headlining, there's hardly anyone there.
You started in Kentucky, and there's, like, a scene of you were, like, how did you grind your teeth in those early days?
And why don't you sound at all like you're from Kentucky?
Jews were impervious to...
you have, like, New York accents wherever we go.
My mom,
Kentucky. It's very nice.
Actually, there are Jews. It's funny. My best friend, his grandparents were like, you know, Hungarian Holocaust survivors. Yeah. And they gave birth to like kind of a redneck daughter who's Jewish. It's kind of funny, but not redneck, but Southern. But like,
Mom is just really nice here.
But my mom's from New York. She's from Brooklyn. Yeah.
So is there's a scene in Kentucky in Louisville?
I mean, I had to start half of it,
right? Yeah. So, like post college, you're the funny kid growing up. Just a little bit of deep dive on you. Like what gave you the tickle? Like the itch. I gotta get up there.
You know, it's funny. I used to like people always ask like, "Well, were you funny?" And I used to be like, "No." But then there is this thing I said once, which looking back, I think in a weird way revealed my temperament to be a stand-up, and it was in summer camp. Yeah. We were we were like on a big hike and it was awful. You know, like I think it was bikes, but it was up hills. It wasn't that bad, but I was really out of shape. And I was maybe 15, and I was so worn out. At one point, I turned to my friend. I go, "If my grandmother ever bitches about the Holocaust again, I'm going to slap her in the face." And it was so like shocking. And I think that's the moment where I'm like, oh, for me personally, my kind of stand-up, or there's a certain bluntness that's like shocking.
Yeah.
That like I think can help someone. That temperament can be for a stand-up where you just say horrible shit. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Or you just exaggerate to a ridiculous degree like that. And other kids weren't saying that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So that might have been the moment where, looking back, where I'm like, oh, this is the seed of being a stand-up.
And that was when your comedic angle was kind of revealed to you.
Yeah. And I'm still basically doing stuff like that.
Right. Or saying the thing, like I like your style because it's like the bad thought that's never vocalized. And you're like, yeah.
I just think a certain bluntness.
Yeah.
A certain bluntness to like just say what the fuck, you know what I mean?
Did you get the rush of like socially, like, were you a center of attention comedy guy or more like a subversive, you know?
When I started out, I wanted to be like Doug Stanhope.
Yeah.
And it took years to like exercise those demons to like get out of him. Mm-hmm. He was very influential for me when I started. You know, he was a guy who was like, oh, I can do this, because it was takes. It was like takes I thought were really cool,
right.
And they're making good points. I loved him. And I thought you could be drunk and crazy, and it took me years to like quit alcohol. And he's great. I still think he's great, but he's a bad influence on comics because it's very rare what he can do. He drinks, but he's very coherent and does great hours and is really prolific. And like for me, quitting drinking was like really important.
He's kind of the prototypical stand-up artist also.
Yes.
Like not doing it for the fame or money or status. I think he lives in the middle of nowhere in the desert.
Yeah,
or he used to
Arizona.
Kind of like an Attell or a stand-up, like this is what I'm about. End all be all. Stand up on the stage at the club.
Even if there was no industry, this is my art form. You're a painter. I do it with this and a mic.
Which is kind of
an industry around
which is funny because it is its own kind of marketing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny.
The Bukowski, like
you can't escape it. No matter
funny.
what you are, the brand is just how you perspective.
He was basically the Bukowski of stand-up, and I love Bukowski too. Bukowski got me into writing prose, so like, and he got me into doing stand-up. He is like Bukowski, and I used to love that stuff.
Yeah, what's your favorite Bukowski?
Yeah, Michael's calling me out. I gave you a look.
I don't know. I know Bukowski's a writer. That's about all I know
he's a
about
poet
him.
and a novelist, and he was drunk all the time.
Right. I'm thinking of Bukaki. What's that?
And he wrote very like spare, minimal, blunt,
right,
honest, like shockingly honest. He was a poet for people who thought they didn't like poetry.
Right.
You know, his shit was very clear and like blunt and honest.
Right.
And it was also, he was a drunk and he was okay with that.
Right.
But so like, yeah, that influenced me. But eventually it took a while for me to like get out of that.
So were you drinking hard and partying hard?
Yeah.
Early days. In terms of the process of developing your material, like as you were getting up and starting, like what was that? How did you approach it? Were you writing every day, pen and pad, and like developing things, or testing out premises on stage? Like, just to geek out on the process.
It's hard to fully remember. It's all kind of a blur because it was like 16 years ago.
Yeah.
But I remember when I started, I actually do think I was kind of good right away. I don't think I was like amazing, obviously, and not nearly as good as I thought I was. But I had promise pretty quickly. But like, I feel like in the beginning, I had all these long bits, and I was afraid to do them a second time. That's what happened. I'd go on stage and do like a long bit, and it did well, but in my head, I'm like, this fucking crushed. Now I write a rant or something, I go on stage, and it's like nothing. I'm just so much more aware. But like, I would do a long bit, and then I'd be afraid to do it again. I was really afraid to say the same material twice because I didn't want it to bomb. So I ended up, it was actually,
even if it did well. You were saying,
yeah, I didn't want to bomb the second time, which does happen.
Right.
So I remember I threw everything at the wall and was just constantly writing and constantly doing new stuff. And then I actually had to learn the discipline of working on it,
right,
and saying it over and over again, the craftsmanship of that,
and finding the pacing and the pausing, the dynamics of it.
Yeah, right. My big thing in the beginning was, I think it's always what I'm like. I work on something like new, and then kind of like, I was very quick to throw it away or just move on.
And as opposed to making it better and like building on
Though
it.
I do think ultimately when you do start, I think it's really good to throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. You know what I mean? And then I got better at the discipline part.
I feel like I have the opposite problem. Something works, and I'm like, okay, that's gonna be a reliable bit, and I'll get so sick of it. But I know it'll work consistently enough that I like use it as a crutch in the.
I mean,
I get sick of my tight 10 because. But then if I have to try something new, it becomes like it crowds out riskier material.
Either extreme is bad. You know, you want to have a balance. But I do think, especially when you're starting out, I like just try everything. You know what I mean? Just see, like, because it's like you don't know. Your voice is basically there's all these things you think are funny, right? Yeah. And then the audience agrees with some of that. And whatever the audience agrees with that you think is funny, that's your voice. It's like the parts of yourself. The Venn diagram where you and the audience agree this is.
But that also takes the good writing, like to bring the audience to see what you see. Yeah. And into that place. Course, yeah. So sometimes you think it's funny, and you kind of know it is because it is. Like even though it's subjective, if you can find a way to bring the audience here through the right kind of setup, premise, and development, like. And actually, I've seen some of your stuff where like it starts and they're like okay, and then it goes. To an even deeper place, and then they're like, and then it's like you bring them even deeper into it. Like you don't abandon the premise, you keep going.
But I actually don't think you're all. I mean, sometimes maybe, and now
obviously you have to kill some babies and forget it. But yeah,
and now I'm more secure. Sometimes I'm like, this is funny, but actually for the most part, especially in the beginning, I really think as a comedian, the tough thing is we can't really find ourselves that funny, or we're not fully aware of how funny we are because it's so much based on people's perception. So when you're telling jokes, their perception of you as a voice, as a person, as a body, all that stuff comes together and they laugh. And you're not always fully aware of it. That's why you have to try a bunch of stuff and then they laugh right there in that moment. And you're like, oh, okay, that's actually the funny moment. Right. That's the moment where it's really funny for me to say that line like that and have that reaction. And I don't think you can always, I mean, that's a really hard thing about comedy. Yeah. I don't really find myself. I mean, I know something's funny, but it's hard for, like, if I watch a clip, I'm not laughing. Right. Like, I don't find myself.
But when you first thought of it, you were like,
yeah.
Huh. In other words, the reason is you're not laughing is because you were not you don't have that element of.
But it puts you in a weird place where, like, you can't really know exactly what the audience is saying because you can't really get a full sense of who you are.
Sure, but it's like a puzzle. You're like, man, especially if something doesn't work repeatedly. And I've spoken to Mark Norman after shows about, like, one time he was like, I've tried it, I keep trying it. I do think it's funny, but for some reason...
They don't agree. There's plenty of things that I think are really funny, but the audience doesn't find it funny coming out of your voice. And that's because you have a different perception of you than the audience has. And you always will, and you're just trying to find that middle ground.
And was there any distinction for you between, like, you think from that 15-year-old who said something funny to being on stage at a certain point saying, I'm back to that same 15-year-old in a good way? Like, I find that for comedians and for myself, everyone is drawn to stand up for different reasons and similar reasons where they find themselves like there's something funny I could share and entertain the crowd with, but I don't feel like me yet. I feel like I'm just trying stand up.
I think what you're saying is true. And
like when did you feel like you?
I think there is this kind of interesting thing where when you start, you're just saying stuff that made your friends laugh, but for some reason it doesn't really work on stage. You're like, oh no, this is like inside jokes. Yeah. And then you learn how to really develop a joke. But then eventually those jokes you look back on and go, oh, actually, this is like a joke anyone could say. Right. And then actually you eventually find your way back to your real self. Yeah. And you are saying the stuff that makes your friends laugh. But now it's what makes your friends laugh is more of something that is like, not always, but like you are finding the thing that's like funny about you personally, but you have a little sense of craft to make it work out.
Right. And you understand why it's funny.
Yeah, but you do. The best jokes are the ones that are like only you can say. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, Conan said it's not that you're not funny when you're bombing at stand-up because it's like you are a funny person in an uncomfortable situation, so you have to really adapt to the situation and rediscover, and also like develop it in a way that's, I mean, for a crowd, it's just very different than just when you're shooting the shit. But like. Returning back to that self and finding yourself is a very long process where the crowd can become your crew of friends.
Exactly.
You're with.
That's a very insightful. I think you are trying to get back to that. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, you didn't get it. You're like, why are you laughing at this? You know, Zach found it hilarious. You know what I mean? You know, but then eventually you do try to get back to that with a sense of craft that makes it work.
And also Zach knows exactly who you are every time you open your mouth. I guess the challenge is within 10 seconds, how do I get these people to know who I am? The same way Zach.
Exactly.
Affiliate them.
And the perspective.
But I find a lot of the process is kind of organic, and I'm not. I think a lot. I hate even talking about comedy sometimes because I feel like a lot of comics are like, this is what it's all about. But I feel like we're all just kind of like slowly. it's something that evolves over time, and it's not always conscious what we're doing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Was there anything that you picked up, like opening for Louis, or like these greats that like you can only get from literally being with them?
Yeah,
or, like talking to them. Like any.
Yeah, I mean,
like what's he like?
I mean,
craft-wise,
yeah, I mean,
but also what's he like?
You got to be a little weary because every advice a comic gives you, they're saying it for themselves, what works for them, so it's not always true.
Sure.
But I think with Louis, the thing he always impressed, which I do think is really important, it's hard to fully get there, is like when you're telling a joke again, you're trying to convey the emotion that you had at the time. You're not trying to get the audience to laugh. So when you say a joke and it gets laughs, you start to like memorize that joke, and you start learning, if I say the joke like this, it will get a laugh, you know? And there's a certain roteness to that. I mean, we all have to have that on some level, but it's important to try to like bring back the emotion you had when you originally thought of the joke. Because basically what he pressed, which I do think is important to always remember, memorization and roteness is the enemy of stand-up because it's so easy to fall into. Mm-hmm. And we are actors trying to convey the emotion we had when we first had it. So when I tell a joke, if I've told it a while, I'm not trying to like, I shouldn't think like, if I say it like this, I'll make you laugh. I should think, what is the feeling here I had, and how do I express that, you know? And I think it's important. I do think that's something you have to learn once you've learned how to crush. Mm-hmm. It's not something that's important when you start out. When you start out, just try to do better. Yeah. Do something once you know how to crush. And how do you learn how to do that in a more natural way?
It reminds me in music of like, you got to learn all the songs and exactly how they go note for note and nail them.
Yeah.
Then you can start to play around.
Then you can play around and try to really capture that sense of presence, which you can't get the whole time. You can't. It's like riding a sailboat. You catch the wind sometimes.
I totally those two different approaches where it's like you have the Seinfeld Mark Norman approach, which is like incredibly precise.
Yeah.
Like, work it out, move this, nudge this word this way, wait a beat. And like, to me, there's like different styles of music. There's like music that's very precise. And when you hear like a Seinfeld or a Norman, like they play around, like a Norman will play around when he's doing that. But when he's doing his stuff, it's incredibly precise.
Right,
and then
you see
the
opposite,
And it's the exact opposite. And he'll play around, but like, it's all like kind of, he has said like, you know, I've watched podcast clips of him talking about like getting on stage. It's like, I don't know how someone just like plays with the premise, but Louis I gotta play with it.
You're right. And already I'm guilty of just saying advice that is
No, but you were saying that was Louis' perspective. It's not, it's not the rule.
It's what I like. It's what I like personally, but there are all certain different types of comics.
The pathways to do it, I think, are all true.
Right. There's certain comics who are very scripted.
Yeah.
And that's the precision. Uh-huh. And I really aspire to like the moments I have the best fun on stage is when I can actually not feel too married to the words, and I can actually just express the emotion and not. I mean, it's a balancing act. You can't just forget all the words, but like to feel like you can. The shows where I'm doing the shows I love are the ones where I'm feeling I'm like saying things differently than I usually do, and it gets laughs still. Right. And those are the ones that I really like. And, so that's it. That's like the two different.
I feel it too because when you've done it a bunch of times and you've relied on it worked that time, so I'm going to do it that way, and it's like kind of rigid.
Yeah.
You're like you're imitating yourself.
Right,
and it feels really gross. Like you watch it back, you're like, I can't watch this.
You're not present.
It's not me.
You're not
I'm
present.
acting out a joke I did once, and I'm imitating that performance over and over again.
You're not present, and that's what I really think what comics mean when they say they bomb. Mm-hmm. It's not even really all about the laugh. It's the fact that like when I'm unhappy after a set, it's because I didn't lose myself at all in the set.
Transcend.
And we're trying to lose being our miserable self for a little bit of time. And when you don't do that, you feel like you failed.
The transcended thing.
Even if you're
present.
Even if you did get laughs, you feel like
we
you
had
failed.
Alex Clare on. We spoke about the same thing with music, where he's like, "What are you looking for ideally in a musical performance or any performance? Presence."
What's the best show? Both you guys. What's the best show you think you've ever done in terms of reaching that transcendent spot?
I don't know if I can like pinpoint one. It's not like there's one that's like stands out as the best.
Okay, Ami.
Oh, sorry. but I do know those shows where like it typically the audience has to be very good for that. A lot of times, the more the audience laughs, the more they're engaged, the more I feel free. Because the more the audience, so it's about losing your ego, and for you to lose your ego, you need the audience to be good enough for you to lose your ego. If the audience is not laughing, you're kind of stuck in your ego, and then you can't lose yourself. But when the audience is good, you start to feel the confidence to say it different ways.
Also, even the mistakes work.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where it's like, I'm just being me here, and nothing can throw me because I'm here and I'm with it. happens with music too. You're like, oh, and like the mistakes sometimes become the best part of the show. You're like, oh, that's different. Now I've discovered something else. Or like on the music side, I've been at where something falls apart, so we stop, talk for a second, and like it becomes hilarious, and it's the most memorable part of the show.
Yeah,
because it's real. I had a show where the mic cable came out. I was about to do a Trump impression.
Yeah,
set it up. Teleprompter Trump. Like I love him on the prompter. I'm like, here we go, and then I hear people like, oh my god, oh no, and I'm like, it's okay, folks. Yeah, I can do it without the mic. No one needs the mic. That was just a plot by the radical left to unplug my microphone. They're trying to censor me, so I just went improv of that, and it was way better than the bit would have been.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like, this is great. And I was like, can you hear me? And I got a big applause break.
Yeah, it's great. It's great when you have...
It throws you back into yourself. You have to like go with the old weapons.
That's why I think that's why I think crowd work kind of robs people of that a little, because it's like, I know they do it to feel more present, but you've kind of forfeited the challenge. The challenge is to be present with your own work, with your own material. The minute you're asking the audience a question, you're not really engaging in the, like, to me, it's much, like, I love riffing.
Right.
If you're doing a joke and then there's a sound and you comment on that, that's a way to engage presently with the thing. And even more important than riffing is to actually do the material you've done and discover it in a new way and say it in a new way. And that's real presence of mind. To me, like, crowd work can often, I'm not saying always, and a lot of people do great, often can be a shortcut to a presence,
to organic,
that you haven't really earned.
Right. Yeah. Pete Holmes talks really eloquently about the like therapeutic nature of stand-up, where like I think it might appeal to you, where you're saying something the audience would never allow themselves to say out loud, and hearing you say that lets them relax, and them relaxing lets the stand-up relax, and it's this like interaction you're having.
Yeah, it's like escape from judgment, just saying it, and it's cathartic.
But all this being in the abstract, the catharsis of it, right? It's like, this all comes on the heels of years of just like working at it on the mic uncomfortably with material that you're testing out. Like, I find that in order to get to these places of presence and thinking about things at that level is like, we can't. I tell people who also are like asking like, I want to try, like, what do you have to do? Like, you have to like just put in these reps of uncomfortable sets where you don't feel like yourself. In order to start at something, you have to Jordan Peterson. In order to start at something, you have to start by not being very good at all. So that's what I would say.
I think.
But you
think ever is like, they're like, man, I really do have an opinion on everything. That's exhausting.
Yes, I do. I bloody do. I don't know. I have no idea. He's never said that. I have no idea.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, people should learn how to say that sometimes. I don't have an opinion about this thing that I have no experience with.
Politics. What would I know about politics?
I think like, and this is my advice to like, if anyone, sometimes people ask like advice for when you're starting out, and I think like, I do think that there's two important keys to starting out. Do it as much as possible, but then also record your set and listen to it. Because if you do it as much as possible, but you're not aware how it's going, it doesn't really make you better. That's why so many comics can do it all the time and be bad, because they're like delusional. You can't just do it. True. You have to do it, record it, listen to it, and really see how well you're doing and see how you can
that's
improve.
always harsh to listen back and you're like, I wasn't as good as I thought.
But you gotta do it, because it's like just doing the reps isn't enough. Reps and awareness.
For sure. It kind of reminds me early days in like the music world when you're like taking lessons on an instrument. Like if somebody comes and they're just starting out, they're like, okay, but I want to find my voice. You don't know how to play yet. And comedy's not different. There's the comedic set is an instrument that you're playing in a way, the craft. So you got to get good at the craft, at the whatever it is, like the muscle, the ability to do it in a certain way. The comedy is not different than music in that way. Like you have to be able to do it, and then you'll discover your voice after building a technical facility.
And the voice is organic. It doesn't like, you can't calculate it. The voice, when people are like the voice is an organic thing you're following. So it's like, it will happen. You might find your voice and it's not what people like. You know what I mean? I feel like he found his voice, but like what they really mean is, I like his voice.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
There's probably people who are like, they found their voice. That voice just happens to be someone who sucks. You know what I mean? I wouldn't worry so much about that. I just like finding your voice, just like doing it and getting better. The voice thing, it's like geology. It's like it forms after years, and it's not something you can like calculate.
Fast forward to.
Yeah, it's just geology.
Well, you seem to be in an interesting place, I think, because like your material, I think is at a level as good as all the guys I'm watching when I see it online, and I feel like in terms of how well known you are, like how do you assess like your name catching up with your material? Because I think no one wants to, toot their own horn, but your material it's tight and you're touring and you're doing stuff. And then like getting your name up, I do feel like you're it's hard for people to recognize that in themselves, but I could see it. You're grinding, you're putting out clips on social media, people are seeing stuff, and you're touring cities and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I want to get, I'm slowly developing a fan base, and I want to develop it. And if you're watching, want to follow me on Instagram, Raanan Comedy, Raanan Comedy.
Hershberg.
I'm developing a fan base, and I want to develop. I obviously want it to be bigger. I definitely want it to be bigger, but I also think like whenever I get upset, I always try to really take a step back and just feel grateful that I'm like making a living off of it. Because the truth is, like, it feels like a scam. It feels like a scam that I'm like making a living off of telling jokes. I feel like it's not fair, and maybe it's wrong to think that because I have put in a lot of time and I have done a lot of like.
You're judging yourself too harshly, Raanan.
Well, I just think like, but I also think it's like, if you're just complaining all the time and you make a living off of it, like you've lost a little perspective. Because if you look at the world, people are doing jobs they hate all the time. So I'd like to get a bigger fan base.
Right.
I have no desire to be like. Famous. I have no desire for that. If that happens, I'm not going to stop it, but I don't have a desire for that. I consider my material on somewhat level, a little niche. Like I think you have to be somewhat intelligent. It's a little cerebral, so I don't expect to be doing arenas, and I'm okay with that. But I just wanted to develop a bit of more of a fan base, and then die. I'll be fine.
Well, that'll happen.
I love it. A little bit dark.
Well, it's.
But you know what I'm saying when you pass those. Sorry, Michael.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the thresholds that you work through along the grind, like starting out in a certain place. There's always a spot where you're like, even if I had a bigger opportunity, I would feel terrified going into it because I know that my material is not where I'd want it to be.
Right.
I feel like you're past that point. You feel good about your material and your voice.
I'm always trying to develop more. And
not
deeper.
that, obviously, but like you get to this point where you're like, I feel good about getting up in front of a certain amount of people at this point and sharing what I've been developing and doing it. Like I feel like it represents where I'm at on the timeline of development a little bit. Like it's the best you could do for the moment. Like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because there is a point when you're developing. At least in my case, I can speak for myself, where it's like, I'm not going to do that yet because I'm still like I want to put my best foot forward when I have the opportunity to do it. So there's like a developmental phase,
right?
And now I'm doing a lot, in other gigs and private events and things like that, where there's at least 30 minutes of whatever that I'm like, it feels reliably representative of something that I could feel good about,
right?
Both because there's that moment where like you can kill for the audience, but also but like not for yourself,
right?
Where you feel like I got away with that one, they liked it, but I'm like, ooh, I'm not watching that back, but. That slowly starts to catch up with itself at some point.
Of course. And I always, I do get jealous. I do get bitter. I have all that shit to the high degree a lot of times. But I do try to remind myself when I'm feeling jealous, when I'm feeling bitter, when I'm feeling I'm not farther ahead and other people are feeling farther ahead. I do think it comes from a lack of excitement for what you're working on at the time. And if you're really excited about what you're working on, that excitement will actually put blinders on you and not seeing other people. So I actually think when people feel jealous and bitter, they feel on some level that their art they're doing is not fully expressing themselves. And if you feel like your art is really fully expressing yourself, then I think that matters more, at least to me. And like that, and that excitement from that's what matters. So like, whoever gets like whatever thing you're jealous of.
Some special, some deal, whatever it may be.
It has nothing to do with artistic self-expression. Right. And that is your goal, to really express who you are and express it in a way,
How did the short film you did express yourself? Do you think that came closer than stand-up, or it's just a different channel?
No, it's just a different element, but it's something I like doing, It's like, it's a different element, but I feel... I just want to keep doing that and keep doing stuff that, I focus. I think
Michael's a screenwriter, by the way. In all seriousness,
I was really inspired by it actually.
Oh, thanks,
to be like, I have these resources. Listen, I can't make a feature. I can't get an A-lister, but I have this guy whose face people know. I have this cool idea. Let me put it together.
I think that's.
I love that.
I think that's. You can do that. Like you can always
Most
do.
people can. Yeah.
You can whatever you want to do. You can create art. I mean, you might not be able to get on a whatever TV show you want, but nothing can stop you from doing what you want to do on some level. So just do it.
That's the cool thing about now. I mean, nothing. I've always said that to myself. It's like the only thing stopping me is me, because the resources are at your disposal to at least distribute and make stuff, get it out there, and get people to hear it, and be consistently putting stuff out. Whereas the days of gatekeepers, in order to get anything even made or expressed, like you're saying, people feel so unexpressed in a time where you need someone to greenlight every idea you might have and validate it. Now it's like direct to consumer. You put out a video, people like it, great. Have a show, people come out, film it, great, and repurpose that.
Exactly. So, whenever you feel stuck, just create something. I mean, I don't know. I guess I've done some late nights or some things that you're like credits or whatever. And I was happy at the time, and I do think I wanted to do one at the time. Yeah. It means nothing now, but I was happy at the time. But I do think I do think most of the things I do, or most of the things where people are like, congrats, it's just something I'm doing on my own. Right. So it's it's interesting that people say congrats as if I got something, but I'm just doing my own thing. You know what I mean? So you can always just do your own thing. People are like, hey, congrats, you got a new special. It's but I'm doing it all. Right. So it's
you don't want to buy in. I mean, you want to accept people's praises, but also not buy into what they think it really is.
Well, I just think it's interesting. They treat something you're doing on your own. Yeah. They say congrats as if the industry picked you to do something.
Let them believe it, you know?
Well, I'm just saying,
I know
you'll get the congrats either way. Just do your own thing. Yeah.
Right. You know? And nerdy question, I think some people, for the working comic, you're in making a living in comedy, is it the balance between just corporate private gigs versus club gigs and things like that you're in?
I focus on clubs and little rooms. I do some corporates. Right. The money is good for corporates. Right. It's not you can't fully be yourselves the same way, but it's good money.
It's always hard to go into a room and be like, okay, what's this versus the club where we're like, we've come to laugh.
Yeah, so the clubs is better for, but I do mostly clubs, and then I do corporates every once in a while. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Not that many.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Let it go. So Israel, what do you think?
Well, how much more time do you have?
Yeah. You want to do 5 minutes? Is that good?
Yeah, we could close on anything. I mean, want to close on anything controversial and juicy?
In terms, let's talk a little bit about your experience with Israel since October 7th, because you've been, at least the clips I've saw, you've been going at it pretty directly. Your Jewish identity and
how Jewish are you, Raanana?
I grew up conservative. We were more Jewish than a lot of people, less Jewish than you all. Right. But I grew up conservative, kept kosher at the home.
We're gonna need a circumcised pic for the thumbnail.
Kept kosher at the home.
That's any Jewish guest.
Yeah. I don't know. I have a pretty strong. I grew up. My parents have a pretty strong Jewish identity.
Was the community a small in Kentucky?
Louisville.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
No, there's still a lot of synagogues. Right. We went to a conservative synagogue. There was an Orthodox synagogue, a Reform synagogue, 2 conservative synagogues. Right. And I don't know. I mean, I think Israel's a huge mess all over. I do some jokes. My jokes try to not be ideological, because I personally like jokes that just try to break free from ideologies. Right. I just think that's better. And I think when you're actually making this serious point or political agenda, it's just not as funny.
Right. I mean, it loses the aim. We're trying to be funny here. We're trying to be funny.
There's sort of self-righteousness to it. You know what I mean? But people do different things. I mean, I'm a liberal Jew, so it's tough being a liberal Jew. It's tough being a Jew who I am very concerned about anti-Semitism, and I resent a lot of people who've made me feel like there's a binary choice between being concerned by anti-Semitism and being horrified what's happening in Gaza or worried. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people who aren't Jewish go, well, you're worried about anti-Semitism when all these Gazans are getting killed. And I'm like, well, it's easy for you to say because you're not Jewish. Right. And I have a right to be worried about anti-Semitism because that's also something in my life. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's also a thing. I get anti-Semitic stuff. So,
did the left-wing sort of anti-Zionist, anti-Semitism thing surprise you post-October 7th?
Yeah. I mean, I've always...
In the way that liberal...
I fell out with the far left. I guess I didn't really know where I stood for a long time. I always knew I was liberal. I guess I just, I fell out with the far left when, during the Trump-Biden election, so many of them were openly posting about how they weren't going to vote for Biden. I fell out with him then. I was like,
oh, you mean because he wasn't pure enough?
Yeah, exactly. The moral purity,
right?
Or when he got accused of rape by that woman who has since defected to Russia, and they're like, well, I'm not voting for him. They're all the people who make that moral equivocation. I fell out with them then.
She went and peed on Trump. That's what she did. She went to go pee on me.
Because I think and people have different political views, but me personally, where I side, I think moral purity is a real danger because I think you're not really caring about making the world a better place. You're caring about showing people that you are better than them. You know what I mean? You're not saying, look at these injustices. You're saying, look at these injustices that I care way more about than you. You're actually centering yourself in them. And I think it's very dangerous. And I think most awful things in the world have happened from moral purity. You might not think it, but the Nazis were their own form of moral purity. You know what I mean? And like the people who go, I can't believe these other people aren't on the right. I'm on the right side of history. Whenever people say that, I hate it because I'm like, well, everyone thinks they're on the right side of history. Yeah. And the people who've done the worst things are the ones who have no doubt that they're on the right side of history. Where for a lot of things, it's complicated and you don't always know where you stand. You know what I mean? Right. So I worry about certainty and moral purity. But yeah, I mean, I understand what Israel's going through, and I understand for them, it's survival for them. Yeah. And I understand that the people in Israel, for them, they have to get rid of Hamas. You know, and I understand that they're all blinded by the suffering too. I personally don't think they can get rid of Hamas. And I do think in an ideal world, I really wish they would have just developed security on the border and really developed it and then tried to figure out a better way. I don't think this is working, and I think it is killing way too many people. How do you not make out? How do you not make more terrorists out of this? How do you explain that? So I personally, I also think it might not be possible for humans. It might be too much to ask humans to not be doing this. I think when it comes to survival or that feeling, morals or like whatever, that kind of goes out the window. You're just thinking about your survival. Yeah. But I also think you may lose perspective when you've been attacked like that. You know what I mean?
I hear you. I mean, for me, moral purity, I probably am guilty of it in the sense of like moral principles, like certain principles. I think to be like I think there's the thing to be careful of is like people are afraid that one-sided means wrong.
Right.
In other words, like, well, it's easy to just want to say all sides are crazy, cycle of violence, and what that does is strip all agency and accountability from people who've acted evil and people who are defending themselves. And it strips all moral lens from it, which is sort of the opposite extreme, where it's like you can moralize on certain things, like to take the side of the victim of a kibbutz who was massacred and someone who came in and butchered their family, to take their side exclusively and not both sides is one-sided, and it's right. And I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with the language of one-sidedness in certain circumstances.
And
after October 7th, I was like, I'm a little more right of center, but I was like, not, I was never as hysterical about the sort of Trump age anti-Semitism. We Jews will not replace us. To me, they're like, I get it. They're crazy, but they're not ascendant in media, culture, universities. There's no neo-Nazi cartoons on Disney Plus.
Right.
You know, to me, the other stuff, racializing everything, putting everybody into these groups of hierarchies, was always much more concerning. And even though it even shocked me, like just how overt it was, like the protests in the streets that were pro-Hamas.
Yeah, of course.
I'm like, whoa!
Truly disgusting.
And like heads of schools that won't condemn Hamas. That was even shocking to me.
And anyone who supports Hamas is I mean, I feel like people have been canceled for way less than like openly supporting rape and murder. It's truly disgusting.
Right.
And
on the military tactics question of it all, at a certain point, we have to all admit that we're now not arguing over whether they're justified, but whether it's effective or whether it's juice is worth the squeeze. And that's sort of a military tactical question, less than a moral one, even though obviously pain and suffering.
They're connected, though. The moral, what makes military tactics moralistic is whether it's worth the objective. You know
let's say hypothetically one would say,
but there's morals.
I'm saying it would get rid of Hamas. It would come at huge cost of suffering, but it would get rid of them.
Right.
Well, I mean, your practical point you made is one I've heard before, which is like, will this just create more terrorists? Which is a practical question. I think we don't want that as an end.
I think it's a moral and I think it's not.
You can't separate the two. I get that, but
I think it's not. And I understand if you're Israeli, I understand that like anyone. I understand where you're coming from. I totally get it.
Yeah.
I actually
so you're just like
I understand
reasonable.
where Palestinians and Israelis are coming from.
Right.
I think it's irreconcilable differences.
Right.
And they're too blinded by hate both sides now to really care about the other person. And I understand that. But I think we have an obligation who aren't as connected emotionally to it to look at it a little more objectively. And while I think support of Hamas is awful, and those protests, even if there's some of them I did go to, but I walked through one once, and I immediately saw a sign that said resistance is justified, which is basically saying you're pro-rape, pro-murder. Right. And I didn't see anyone uncomfortable with that sign there, right. Which is a problem. Because if you're in a protest...
Small problem.
Yeah, that's a problem. You know what I mean? So, like, I do have an issue with that, and I do think there's the anger towards Israel can be so blinding and
so
hateful
unique
that you are wondering, like...
What do you want?
Yeah, it's also like... You might not say outright you're anti-Semitic, but I heard someone the other day go, I'm not going to Starbucks. Fuck their Zionist dirty water. And I'm like, I guess you're not technically being anti-Semitic, but it feels anti-Semitic. You know what I mean?
Your choice of words is interesting.
It's
Zionist
also,
pigs.
Yeah.
It's all this like creeping up
and
stuff.
Germs, dirty water, right?
Yes,
germs, which is Hitler. Hitler
yes.
himself was a germaphobe.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of the language of
hated germs more than Jews.
Yeah. And a lot of the anti-Semitism was germophobic.
Yes.
Was this weird kind of like...
He played off of people's sense of like needing to be sanitary and cleansing the world of Jews. Yeah. The trash can with the flag in it. We need to cleanse the world of this vermin.
When you say Zionist dirty water, when you say all Zionists are evil, or like when you say all that, it's like, well, who are you talking about? And this word Zionist is interesting because it's like that can have a broad sweep.
They think it's an insult.
Well, it's becoming...
I'm like, I'm a Zionist. You're right.
It's a placeholder for Jew at this point.
Well, I don't know. People are using it different.
So?
I think people are using it different ways. Yeah. I think originally Zionist was just a movement to establish a homeland in Israel. It wasn't even really Israel. It decided on Israel. There was actually debates about it, where it could be, but it ended up deciding on Israel, and that's the Zionist movement. Now, I guess Zionist now, I thought, is someone who believes in the Israel as state, which is essentially a place where there's a Jewish majority, right? And
just one, little one.
Just Jewish majority, yeah. And I think other people now, when they say Zionist, they think it means Israel can do no wrong. And they use it like that.
Fair enough.
And then you get into the whole argument, well, how are you using it? You know what I mean? So the fact that the definition means different things to different people, I do think some people definitely use it in an anti-Semitic way. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I think people less informed say they're anti-Zionist and they think it means Israel can do no wrong.
Right.
And so when they say they're anti-Zionist, they're just saying, I think Israel can do wrong. And so I think it's like hard to know who you're talking to.
The oddest thing about the whole issue to me is that the people arguing for or against are arguing on behalf from the same principles, like human rights and dignity.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even know which side someone's on yet until they tell you.
Right.
You're like, you're anti-Nazi. Right, so you're anti-Hamas, which has much more in common with the Nazi party than Israel does. Right. And yet the people who hate Israel, which I think represents a lot of the movement, is really a hatred of Israel existing than a lack of Palestine existing. It just seems to be that
a lot of people have clearly hated Israel more than they care for Palestinians.
So, but it's just like you're arguing like it when everyone tries to say, I don't see how people can support Hamas. If you're trying to remove yourself from the situation, I'm like, all you have to do is pretend in their minds that they think Israel are all Nazis. They're Nazis, and so we have to kill all the Nazis.
Which is moral purity.
It's just the moral purity thing. And it's like we're arguing from the same principles. It's like we're against oppression. I'm like, exactly.
I think,
so Hamas, taking people hostage is oppressing them. Targeting civilians is oppressing them. And then they refuse to actually see the nuanced differences.
And I also think
between defense versus
I think a lot of times
aggression.
The comparison to the Holocaust is anti-Semitic because it's a way to basically say, look at you Jews. Did you learn nothing from the Holocaust?
Yeah.
And that's basically saying the Holocaust had some justification to teach Jews a lesson. So when you call, I don't like comparative language, especially with Israel, because Israel is a very unique situation.
Right.
And I think it does a disservice. But when you call Gaza a concentration camp,
Norman Finkelstein style.
Yeah, Norman Finkelstein.
A concentration camp.
Who's just a disgusting human being.
Listen, Raanan, you triggered me. I want to have a civil conversation.
Well, it's just disgusting. What he said after October 7th.
It warms every fiber of my soul.
It's just so disgusting.
I thought only 1,500 people were killed, not 1,600.
But But like, I don't think enough people know his voice.
Not remains niche audiences.
Very
the
niche
Jews get it. It remains an open question.
I think saying words like concentration camp. I mean, Gaza is definitely a horrible. It's a hard place to live, and you have a right to say that. It's a horrible place to live. But when you call a place, with beaches and like clubs, a concentration camp.
Right.
You're doing a disservice to what a concentration camp is. Yeah. And I do think you're saying that because Jews were put in concentration camps, and you're trying to say, look at this irony, you've become the Nazis.
I think it's also the nations of the world saying, like, see, anyone could have done that to the Jews. Even the Jews could have done that to the Jews. It wasn't so bad what we did to you.
Right.
I think it's an excuse a little bit. Like, even Israel did it.
Right,
I think they're forgiving themselves a little bit.
It's also
what happened,
and the other thing is that's so nasty about it is they're trying to strip the history of Jewish suffering and oppression away from Jews.
Yeah.
To say like it's not your thing anymore, and therefore, granted, the Jewish state isn't just valid because of the Holocaust.
Right.
However, at the time that it was established, one of the big cases to be made for the need for a secured, prosperous Jewish state is Jewish self-preservation and protection, given that not just the Holocaust, but everything leading up to it, the history of Jewish persecution, and what the narrative is trying to do is put the Jews in this powerful oppressor class position, stripping all historical persecution away from them and suffering away. Well, and say, it is now you are the ones perpetuating it. You don't have that in your history. It's trying to erasing it.
It is the racism of... treating like woke people would be like if you treat someone who's black like they're not black, like you don't think about that. That's racism, colorblindness.
Right.
Treating Jews like just white people is colorblindness because it's like, it is a different situation, and if we're completely white, then why if I went to prison could I not join the white gang? You know what I mean?
Right. And it's so ironic because they're all anti-cultural appropriation, and you're actually appropriating Jewish suffering and trying to level it at us as if we're the ones doing it.
And you're projecting, when you look at Israel and you say it's just colonial versus that, when you say that, you're projecting your own Western values onto a different situation. So it's like
the lens.
You've centered your whiteness as a thing, where it's like before you said all white people were saviors, like, or white supremacists are like white people are the heroes.
Yeah.
The people who say white people are the devil or who think that, I mean, those people are also centering whiteness. That's the biggest problem, which ignores supremacy amongst all sorts of different groups. You know what I mean? There's no one white in India, but they sure have quite a class system. And when you think only white people can do damage, you're basically just centering whiteness. And it's its own form of reverse white supremacy. But like with Israel, when you act like they're all white, I mean, to me, the irony of that, and what's interestingly how much more complicated it is, that people go, Israel's all white and Palestinians are brown, when in reality, and this is an example of how much more complicated it is, half of Israeli are brown, Mizrahim, and those are typically the more right-wing half. So it's like, not only are you wrong, but it's actually more of the Ashkenazi ones
that are liberal.
Who are liberal. So like, and the reason the Mizrahim are more right-wing is because they got kicked out of Arab countries. So it's like you so know little about it, and I get it's so complicated. It's very tempting.
That's
to
the whole go
simplify.
back to Europe. You can have Europe.
That's right. If we're colonialists,
you think we were originally ancestral?
If we're colonialists, where do we go back to?
Do you think we're originally native to Europe? What's wrong with you?
But that being said, Jews have done awful. I mean, in Israel, there's been awful atrocities.
Stop.
And there's been awful atrocities on both sides. Yeah. And
invisible.
Yeah, and
but the fact that we're able to say that and speak out against it and hold ourselves to a standard,
Yeah.
I think represents the moral differences.
So
it's not like there's Hamas people saying, man, I think we really overstepped there.
Right.
We're going to put some Hamas people on trial for war crimes against Israel. That wasn't cool. It doesn't exist.
Well, that is an interesting thing because, like, people, when they criticize Israel, it's like they vilify Israel, but they also vilify Israel because they somehow think of them of having higher standards.
Yes, the
which
soft
is
bigotry of low expectations.
Which is interesting. Like,
what are you saying about them? What are you really saying about Gazans then? That they're not liable for violating such human rights violations? Because no.
Which is an interesting.
They can.
It's an interesting paradox that Israel's so awful because they don't live up to the high moral standards that we think they should be living up to. But the fact that you think they should be living up to suggests that you do see them as somehow like...
It's all very warped. That you actually hold them to a standard aligned with you.
That being said, though, they are signed to the Geneva Convention, and Palestinians are not. And you can make a case that this war,
Who can?
this
You?
will piss off a lot of your listeners probably.
Yeah.
You can make a case that what they're doing is not technically proportional. You know what I mean? Not proportional versus the two places, but proportional where the military target is not valued to the same level as a civilian's dying.
In the words of Douglas Murray, the myth of proportionality rarely exists, Raanan Hershberg. I don't know what kind of Raanan Hamas. Have you seen Douglas Murray all over?
No, who's that?
British commentator. He's
no.
like, Raanan, I don't know what kind of a creature you are, but that is the ridiculous statement to make.
So, are you feeling lonely these days, like in between two different camps? And
Yeah, I think it's lonely to be a liberal Jew, and it'd be nice to just be like a right-wing Jew or a far lefty, you know. But
don't you find most the people you know, they're like, yeah, it's crazy. Hamas is crazy.
Of course, and like I'm also it's funny. I say I'm lonely, but I'm also all I do is talk to other liberal Jews.
Right.
And we're lonely.
And also, not every. Just because you can't make a cohesive, articulate, comfortable case for Israel intellectually because you're not that familiar with it, doesn't mean you're not like a reasonable human being who's just like, yeah, it seems pretty nuts. Like Hamas obviously seems like the bad guys here. I don't know much, but it looks like, and you could be a feeling person and say it seems crazy what's going on, suffering going on in a war, but you know, it wouldn't take much. It's not like those people are ideologues who have dug their heels in.
As long as you don't support Hamas, and as long as you don't think the Jews should just all leave right now, Israel,
it's cool.
I'm okay with your beliefs.
I mean, it's okay not to know about something, but I think it's like where those people's moral center is. Whether they feel like they could speak out against it because they don't necessarily because they bought into this whole narrative that it's complicated, which it is.
That being said, I mean, there's just so many of every kind. There's people who criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic. There's people who criticize Israel while being anti-Semitic. But there's also people who defend Israel and call everything anti-Semitic. That's criticism.
Right.
And there's people who do horrible things to justify what they think is a Holocaust. So there's every type of person.
Right.
And like, it's not easy talking to a Jew now either because a lot of Jews were like. It's anti-Semitic to associate Jews with Israel, but also at the same time, I do as a Jew have this allegiance to Israel that you're not being sensitive about. So it's just a huge mess all over the place.
When I speak about it, I try not to appeal to people's tribal allegiances. And I try to appeal to the average person's common sense. Like, whether people realize it or not when they're outlining these things, like what somebody is really saying when there can't be a Jewish state is that there can't be a Jewish state. There can be all other ones, but the only state I have a problem with is a Jewish one.
Yeah.
Do you realize how problematic that is?
Of course,
that's kind of why.
And
you don't want to tell people they're feeling or acting a certain way that they're not conscious of, but you try to appeal to the average person's common sense. And you'll usually find most people can get on board with
everything is complicated.
Yeah.
And, it's like if you start...
It's not simple. It's not.
If you start from a place of it's not complicated, you've just chosen moral purity to feel better about yourself.
So you making a special or?
Yeah, it's all this. This is the material for it.
Oh, good.
We're gonna close out here with Raanan Hershberg.
Can we get the impression?
Over the beat?
Yeah.
I think you're bored of this, so maybe I'll stop. The impression of Raanan?
Yeah.
I think Joe Rogan is bad for society. I really do. I think he's bad for society. The only way I would ever go on Joe Rogan is if he asked me.
How's that? It's hard
It's
to do
not
it in front
bad.
of
It's not bad. You got the list well.
You've had that in your bit, right, where you mention it.
Of course.
Do you get Artie Lang a lot?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
You do? Really?
Which is funny because he literally has like a deformed nose now.
No.
You think that would
just
just
my Artie Lang is more like a little. My nose is effed up. I
think we both have like a what do you call it?
either Joe or anyone from his staff. If they asked me, I would
just
go
my
on.
voice. I just my voice.
Raanan Hershberg.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of
Thank you
fun.
guys
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
This was awesome, man. Really nice to meet
Oh,
you.
so much fun. I hope that was cool.
Cool. That's Ami's house with Raanan Hershberg, stand-up comedian and pro-Hamas. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Great discussion. We got into it.
Looks like he's torn a little.